In 1907, when Oklahoma officially became a state and descendants of Creek freedmen were granted land allotments, a young girl named Sarah Rector received 160 acres of land, though at the time she had no idea what to do with it, especially since the land appeared useless and was said to be good for nothing but tornadoes and snakes, leading her father to believe they should sell it. Until one day Sarah claimed she could hear something beneath the ground, insisting she heard oil flowing underground like a fast-moving river, even though her parents did not believe her and struggled to afford the $30 property tax. Yet Sarah remained firm, saying that God gave her ears to hear and the land for a reason, which led her and her father Joe to begin visiting oil companies in Muskogee, where Joe was repeatedly thrown out of offices because he was a black man and even mistaken for a trash collector by Pan Oklahoma Petroleum, while Sarah separately walked into a whites-only cafe where a man offered her lemonade instead of water, and the waitress later wiped her cup with a towel before ushering her out. And when Sarah reunited with her father at the oil company, Joe explained he was not there for trash but to ask if they would drill for oil on his daughter's land, at which point Sarah boldly entered and declared she owned 160 acres with oil beneath it, even pointing out the exact location on a map she could read, impressing a man known as Big Jim, who agreed to inspect the land but warned drilling would be expensive, deep, and time-consuming, prompting Sarah to insist the land be leased first, after which Big Jim offered a standard contract of 50 cents per acre for 6 months, though Sarah corrected him by demanding the proper rate of $1 per acre, along with a 1/8 royalty, carefully reading the entire contract and explaining it to her father before Pan Oklahoma began drilling at full speed for 3 months, only for Big Jim to later claim the land was dry and leave the equipment behind, because removing it would cost more, which discouraged Sarah until a man soon arrived offering to buy the land, asking to speak man-to-man with Joe, and offering $2 per acre, then 6 when pressed, though Joe insisted on consulting Sarah, causing the man to leave abruptly, which made Sarah realize Pan Oklahoma had found oil and wanted the land outright, leading her mother Rose to pull out the deed and the family to hide it just before armed men broke into their home searching for it and shot Sarah's dog Blue before fleeing, after which Sarah feared the deed would get them killed, while Rose reminded her that Sarah herself believed God had given her the land for a reason. And the next day, while searching for her wounded dog and finding only his collar, Sarah wandered into an oil camp where she encountered Bert, the man from the cafe, and discovered he was an oil finder and wildcatter, to whom she explained that Pan Oklahoma had lied about the dry hole and tried to swindle her out of the land, offering her only $6 per acre, and though Bert initially dismissed her, Sarah demanded to be treated seriously and proposed a business partnership, explaining she already had drilling equipment left on her land, leading Bert and his partner Mace to agree to a 50-50 split after shaking hands, renaming the operation Sarah's Oil, and continuing drilling past the 1,000 feet Pan Oklahoma had reached, until Big Jim eventually returned with an altered lease claiming ownership and threatening them to leave, only for Sarah to call out his cheating, Bert to aim his gun, and Big Jim to insult Bert while offering Sarah $20 per acre, an offer she refused as the confrontation escalated. When Sarah firmly declared, "I ain't selling," Big Jim's return made Bert realize just how much oil must truly be beneath the land, and that Pan Oklahoma was prepared to fight to take it. And not long after, while drilling continued, the machinery began malfunctioning so badly that Bert ordered Mace to shut it down out of fear it might explode. And when Mace climbed down to inspect it, he discovered the drill was stuck nearly 1,500 feet underground, which seemed like the end of the well unless they abandoned it, though Mace suggested dynamiting the loose rock, an idea Bert rejected as too dangerous and expensive, while other options like using a wall hook were unreliable, rare, and costly, prompting Sarah to criticize them for giving up too easily and to remind them that her teacher always said everything in life has value, which sparked an idea in Bert's mind, leading him to take Sarah and a sample of drilling mud to a geologist for testing, even though the test cost $10 that Bert had to scrape together from every pocket he had, and while waiting for the results, Bert distracted himself by charming a woman he claimed to know through her late husband, a tactic that earned him a dinner invitation and revealed his familiar habit of flirting to survive. Yet when the geologist finally reported that the oil might be thousands of feet deeper and heavily contaminated with salt water, Bert sensed something was wrong, followed the geologist, and discovered he had been paid off by Pan, Oklahoma to deliver the sample to them, forcing Bert and Sarah to seek an honest opinion elsewhere, which led them to Taft, Sarah's black hometown, where they found an unlicensed but brilliant geologist who charged only $5 and soon announced astonishing results, explaining that the crude was extraordinarily light and pure, possibly the richest field in all of Oklahoma, meaning Sarah's land held trainloads of oil, though the well remained clogged and fixing it would require far more money than they had, prompting Bert to unsuccessfully apply for a bank loan of $2,000 before resorting to flirting with wealthy women to raise funds, a spectacle Sarah interrupted by bluntly presenting herself as Bert's business partner and laying out their need for expensive equipment, an encounter that drew the attention of the marshal and forced them to leave, after which Bert purchased explosives and violently defended Sarah from a racist seller, only to return home and learn from the marshal that two Creek Nation children, Sarah's classmates, had been murdered in their sleep, a tragedy that left Sarah in tears, and her mother Rose terrified for her daughter's safety, insisting nothing must ever happen to her. And despite accusations from Mace that Bert had swindled widows to raise money, drilling resumed until the machine jammed again, just as Pan, Oklahoma's legal counsel arrived with papers demanding the return of all equipment and claiming ownership of the oil through a disputed sublease. Accusations Bert mocked by pointing out that an 11-year-old girl had supposedly forced them off the land, after which he threatened violence if any of Pan, Oklahoma's men stepped foot there again, rejected a private settlement offer outright, and was brutally beaten as the conflict over Sarah's land escalated toward an inevitable showdown. Big Jim, pleased with himself, remarked cynically about what a wonderful business they were in, while wondering aloud what a little girl could possibly do with that kind of money, as the courts meanwhile expressed growing concern over what they described as an uneducated and underage formerly enslaved population, prompting the state to insist that black children with oil-rich land be assigned white guardians, a situation Big Jim immediately recognized as an opportunity, realizing that if Bert became Sarah's legal guardian, he could then legally sell the land back to Pan, Oklahoma, which led Bert to pause and demand 15 royalty points in return for his cooperation, only for Big Jim to counter that the standard royalty was 12.5, to which Bert replied that betraying a child would require a price worth paying, a bargain Big Jim ultimately accepted, after which Bert returned to Sarah and instructed her family to grab their rifles and leave the house for their own safety, terrifying Rose, who said if they wanted the land, they could have it, because her only concern was her daughter's life, while Bert later told Mace about the deal, justifying his decision by claiming the well was damaged and that the best option was to let powerful companies come in and drill a new one, even though Mace objected to betraying Sarah, and Bert coldly explained that in their world no one would ever allow a black girl to keep a mother lode of that size anyway, and that he would make it up to her later. And meanwhile, when Sarah's family returned home, they were shocked and overjoyed to find their dog Blue alive, a moment that felt miraculous, especially when that night Rose asked Sarah what she would have given to have Blue back, and Sarah answered everything, causing Rose to believe it was a sign. So the very next day, when Bert arrived with the guardianship papers, Sarah hesitated, pointing out that signing would make him the boss of her life, while Bert insisted she trust him because he understood the system and how to navigate it. And as Sarah signed the papers, she looked to her parents and asked if this was truly to protect her, to which Bert said yes, leading her to sign and shake his hand once more as a court hearing was scheduled to verify everything, though Joe remained deeply uneasy about Bert, believing a man who chased riches his entire life could not be trusted, while Sarah believed otherwise. And Rose reminded them all that no one could see into a person's heart, but that they could still walk into court with dignity, trusting God to give Sarah the words she would need. And outside the courthouse, crowds of black families gathered in support, openly opposing the white guardian law, because so many guardians had stolen oil-rich land from those they were meant to protect, as news of oil beneath Sarah's land had spread everywhere. And when Sarah entered the courtroom, a woman named Miss Barnard volunteered legal help, but was silenced by the judge, who instead questioned Sarah directly, prompting her to ask why her own parents could not serve as guardians when the state had given her the land because of her ancestors, explaining that when the land was worthless, it was considered hers alone. But once oil was discovered, others suddenly claimed it, forcing her to accept a white guardian, and all she wanted, she said, was to keep what had been given to her, asking if that was not the very purpose of the law, a statement that stirred vocal support from the black audience and led the judge to adjourn the hearing and officially grant guardianship to Bert, whose thoughts raced as they exited the courthouse, and Joe requested copies of the papers to be reviewed by Miss Barnard, which Bert provided before again asking Sarah to trust him, only to head straight to Big Jim afterward and demand not only 15 points on Sarah's land, but on every surrounding parcel as well, knowing the oil beneath Sarah's land was measured at an extraordinary 40.6 gravity, and that Pan, Oklahoma was secretly buying nearby properties to siphon it away, a demand Big Jim quietly accepted, sealing the betrayal even as the fortune beneath Sarah's feet continued to grow. Bert insisted that Sarah's safety be guaranteed as part of the deal, yet Sarah later saw him entering the Pan, Oklahoma office and confronted him, reminding him that he had promised to do right by her, to which Bert replied that he had a plan and that the oil business was ruthless, but she would still get her share, though Sarah quietly told him that it was no longer about her money, but about his soul. And soon afterward, Mace dropped Sarah's family off at home, only to notice a hidden car on his way back, realizing too late that it belonged to Pan, Oklahoma's men, who confronted him with guns, forcing Mace to draw his own weapon despite being outnumbered, and he was killed. While back at the house, Rose heard gunshots and ordered her children to run toward Creek Nation land as Pan, Oklahoma's men arrived outside, prompting Rose to arm herself with a knife and Joe with his gun. And not long after, Bert saw the men leaving, just as Miss Barnard arrived with a journalist to meet Sarah, and when they reached the house, Joe explained that Pan, Oklahoma's men had come for Sarah and that he had fired to drive them away, after which Bert went searching for Mace and found only his lifeless body, leading Miss Barnard to warn him that Sarah was next because Pan, Oklahoma still claimed the land through the guardianship papers and wanted her dead to prevent further legal challenges, prompting Bert to suggest returning to court to cancel the guardianship and assign it to Miss Barnard instead, though they would first have to find Sarah, who by then was hiding with her younger brother and their dog at South Ream as instructed by their mother, where Pan, Oklahoma's men trespassed into Creek territory, asking for a colored girl and receiving no cooperation until Sarah suddenly saw a car approaching and realized it was the thugs themselves, forcing her to send her brother running as gunfire erupted, only for tribal police to arrive just in time alongside her family, reuniting them safely, after which Sarah learned of Mace's death and Bert tearfully apologized for everything, and Miss Barnard immediately returned to court to argue that Sarah's guardianship must be reconsidered because her life was in danger and the nation was watching, leading the judge to uncover a critical flaw in the paperwork, that Bert was not a legal Oklahoma resident but a Texan who could not prove otherwise, rendering the guardianship null and void, allowing Sarah to appoint Miss Barnard as her new guardian, while the judge warned them to prepare for retaliation from Pan, Oklahoma, prompting Bert to unveil his final plan involving dynamite buried 1,000 feet underground to either collapse the well or finally unleash the oil. And the next morning, Big Jim arrived at Sarah's land under a white flag, claiming he only wanted to talk, though Rose hid her children as tensions rose, and Big Jim secretly positioned a machine gun in his car, triggering chaos as everyone took cover and Sarah detonated the dynamite, causing the ground to shake and oil to erupt violently from the earth, sending Sarah running toward it in pure joy while Big Jim shouted that it was his oil and drew his gun, only to be stopped by Bert, who revealed he had planted dynamite under the surrounding wells as well. And when Big Jim aimed at Sarah, Joe shot the gun from his hand, leading to Big Jim's arrest as Sarah danced in triumph beneath the gushing oil she had always believed was there. And though celebrations followed, Bert's past caught up with him when the widow he had borrowed money from arrived to claim her share, forcing Bert to leave despite Sarah offering to help him, an offer he refused because she had already given him something more valuable by making him reflect on his soul, and as a lifelong treasure hunter, he chose to walk away in search of something new, saying goodbye despite Sarah's protests, after which Sarah went on to accomplish many things, beginning by buying the segregated cafe and reopening it to everyone. And with that, Her journey, from unheard child to rightful owner of her destiny, came to a powerful end.